They're really cool. a lot of very cool moments in this game. Yeah. All right, Canvas, you can come back now. I know you can't hear me, but that's okay. All right. Next up is my playoff game against Hugo, which honestly went pretty well. I got bingoed on, which is obvious from the title here. But I think both Hugo and I played this game pretty cleanly, and outside of like a couple of like very minor things that I could have done a little bit better, I think I played pretty well here. Weird moment at the start of this game, by the way. When I was loading into this match, I clicked cast review on accident. I thought I just automatically loaded, but I definitely just like instinctually clicked cast review and loaded up the first version of this board, which is not the version that we're seeing here. It's the version of the board that's like still behind this. When I loaded into the reloaded board, it like didn't clear my cache right for some reason, so I was still seeing the previous one. So there's like a little bit of an awkward delay here at the start of the game as the game's getting started. But if you're wondering why there was an immediate pause like before the game started and then we're kind of just both sitting here for a bit, that would be why. But good news is it didn't actually impact the match at all. I just did want to kind of explain that at the start. And we do see a head-to-head in Mooncat trying to beat 2 warps. I take a death and end up not being able to get that goal anyway. We then see... We also have the head-to-head in pin golf right away. That's really funny. I was going to say, I know I went into pin golf right away, but... Alright, we're going to watch this one back almost like, I don't want to say fully, but... just the fact that I haven't gotten to watch this one back in general, but I didn't realize we immediately started this game with back-to-back races. That's really funny. Not sure, Morzus, but they'll be here for a while for bingo stuff, because we still have all of the underground tourney as well. Gonna be honest, this was kind of a weird game of pin golf for me. It was both like really, really good and also really weird, so... like I had some like ridiculous shots in this, and then I specifically remember hole 18, I just like dunked into the water like 5 times in a row, and that's literally never happened before. And then I shorted that shot, which has also never happened before when I've been in that position. But then got this dunk. Like, this is the weirdest game of pin golf of my life. I'm gonna very slowly recap this game of pin golf specifically, because for some reason this was both like the best and worst game of pin golf I've ever had. Yeah, the pressure of playing Hugo is definitely pretty intense. It's the first time I've ever actually gotten to play Hugo, so I was honestly more excited than nervous, but obviously when you're playing a player who has not lost in arguably the most competitive tier where everyone is losing and beating each other, is a little intimidating. Thankfully, I would consider myself to be pretty comfortable in pin golf, so eventually am able to grab that space and stick around for the cherry, because the cherry's not like significantly farther away from where I'm at now, and could potentially theoretically threaten the column 5 bingo here. Meanwhile, Hugo pops into Fistel to reach wave 7 as Cat. One of the benefits of my square being in the bottom corner here is it does theoretically, I guess, threaten this bingo, and this bingo. Obviously, one space isn't really threatening much of a bingo, but something that you just got to be kind of aware of as you're going a little bit farther in. So I stick around for the cherry, and I'm able to also grab this Day of Onion Delivery driving in reverse. Meanwhile, Hugo pops into Gulf area to try to obtain the brakes. As a side note, this onion delivery goal is one that I really like, but has proven to be a little harder than I maybe initially gave it credit for. Because if you get some deliveries that are like really far away, this goal is actually like really awkward to do. And then if you get deliveries like this where they're all like right next to each other, this goal is like completely free. Like, being able to just back up over this dirt and go to Kyler Projects from there is so much better than I had earlier in the season, where I had to, like, go all the way to Jurley's or something, and then all the way back. And one of the good things about driving in reverse is that you actually go just as fast as you, like, would be going forward. Let me put on another brake core next, because it looks like that one's done. You know what? We'll go by the way, by... Okay, so worth mentioning, by the way, that during this time Hugo has been working on obtaining the brakes. Yeah, I hadn't tried this goal with bad RNG until pretty recently, and the amount of weird deliveries that you can get, because it doesn't even just have to be like get screwed on Jurley's. Like, if you just get a couple that are like pretty far away, or require jumps which you can't take, it's surprisingly brutal. And then also, I've mentioned a couple of times with this goal that if you are at the point where you like take any damage or whatever, like I did just there, you can normally drive fast and heal yourself, so it's not that big of a deal. But you don't get that benefit of being able to do that in the reverse mode. So I stay in to pick up a gift and then immediately quit out, and then start to open up Valbrace to start to work on 2 chests in 5 games, and then I read that the Gulf area space is there. So in the first 10 minutes of the match, we've had 3 direct head-to-heads, which is honestly ridiculous. Like, I could tell while playing this game that there was a lot of head-to-heads, but I guess I didn't even realize some of these spaces that I got were also head-to-heads. So Hugo's down to 2 strokes here, and eventually down to 1 stroke. And at the start of this, I'm not gonna lie, I got nervous and started immediately going to the Blockbuster. And then I realized, oh, maybe it actually is a good idea to get the Blockbuster first, both because I want the gift and because I want to make this route over to brakes a little bit easier. Because I have, at this point, learned the setup that Violet uses, shoutouts to Violet, by the way, to line up where you don't need the Blockbuster and can get through the cave leading to the brakes a little bit easier. But I kind of wanted the Blockbuster as a gift in this game anyway once I saw Gulf area was on the card, so I was like, I might as well just combine both of these. This does give Hugo a little bit more time to be able to work on this square, and is able to get a little bit better of a lineup here. But thankfully I'm able to honestly play some of the best Gulf area I've ever played in my life. I don't think I've ever reached the Blockbuster with this many strokes before, and then having the Blockbuster in the tunnel that Hugo's currently stuck in kind of allows you to just take a very direct shot on the way over there. So eventually does quit out, and shoutouts to Michelle. And then starts to work on Magic Garden, reach a score of 10,000 before scoring 50 Oppies. Basically just means you have to be pretty efficient with your Oppie drop-off and build up a couple of potions, and then just do your score grinding a little bit earlier. Yeah. The thing with Gulf area I've noticed, especially before you get the brakes, is that you're definitely a little more susceptible to not remembering how helpful like little baby taps are to line yourself up. because normally you just use the brakes to brake whenever you need to. Also, this route over to this checkpoint was the rudest it's maybe ever been. I also got slightly lost, but that bug is very mean. But thankfully, because of the Blockbuster, I mostly just want to leave this on here as a comparison point for how much easier the Blockbuster actually makes this goal sometimes. Because outside of like a very direct race where I absolutely need to obtain the brakes as the first thing, this is much more chill even when this tunnel doesn't go right. So I try the lineup just to see if it works, but end up messing up the shot. Get this ridiculous ass bounce, and then this tunnel, which Hugo ended up having to like do these weird bank shots all the way around, ends up just being 2 direct shots all the way down. And I then see Hugo mark off the Magic Garden space. I'm gonna be honest, I guess in hindsight I could have actually held this obtain the brakes a little bit more. Especially knowing that Hugo is likely going to stick out Magic Garden for the gold disc here. But I was mostly just concerned with getting spaces and moving on to other spaces at this point. But Hugo does quit out of Magic Garden pretty much right as I grab the brakes. And then I do see the threat of my own diagonal starting to form. I considered going into Mortal first, but at least got the dust off. And then race number 4, Mooncat Pin Golf Area, technically in Grimstone, yeah. So it looks like Hugo is waiting through to the demo screen to get the manip here, and I'm just gonna go manipless and hope that it works out for the best. Yeah, so we do see Hugo doing the RNG manip here, it looks like, while I take the more natural route of just trying to get my way down there. Fun fact for this goal, as long as you get any kind of normal encounters, there's normally a pretty safe route, and you're normally able to kind of just make your way out. I do leave the city first, and I'm kind of just hoping for good encounter RNG here. Because, as I've mentioned in a couple of other bingo matches, this ends up being a pretty important space for either of us. Unfortunately, I get a hawk and get immediately blinded, so showing off the power of the RNG manip, and then I forget that you can't run away unless you're blinded, so I end up having to take a reset here, which then puts me behind Hugo. And given that Hugo is going for the RNG manip, as long as he doesn't crit anyone, should basically just be at the point where all of his battles are pretty much free. Meanwhile, I am subjecting myself to the whims of RNG, and to be perfectly honest, actually get pretty close here. Like, for throwing myself to the whims of RNG and having a bad battle, I am maybe 15 seconds total behind Hugo here. This race felt very close when I was in it, so I'm glad that it ended up being that close here too. So yeah, Hugo's able to feed the dog treat pretty much right as soon as I reach the church. I almost quit out here, but then I realized that I might as well grab the 2 chests while I'm here, to be able to open 2 chests in 5 games. Open both of those and then quit out. So Hugo does a good job of blocking that diagonal there, and we are tied 4-3. Friendly reminder, by the way, we've been watching this pretty much all in real time, so only 17 minutes of this match have passed so far. I am very happy that I get to play Mortal 1, and I actually got to use something that I had specifically learned from a bingo chat, where you can use Open Tomb to skip the opening cutscene to be able to get into level 1 right away. But then I realized that if I'm going for the goal where I kill enemies, I should probably not kill enemies and have to restart anyway. Meanwhile, Hugo's going for score 50k in Kit Club, which will start to threaten the middle column bingo a bit here. I'm able to grab 2 levels in Mortal 1 pretty quick, and I see that column starting to form. Hugo starts to threaten with the party house space, which will, spoilers, end up getting back to in a little bit. But I do want to rewind and pause so y'all can take a look at this party house seed, because in my practice of any party house thing I've ever done, this was one of the most weird seeds I've ever seen, where there's no real way to very easily get popularity outside of like 2 kind of not very common at all units in Mr. Popular and Werewolf. The money generation is spies, which is like okay but not great, and outside of that you're kind of just left to hope that you can either build up enough money where you can get dragons or build up enough popularity to be able to get unicorns. I want to bring this up because Hugo and I were both in party house, spoilers, for a little bit here, but I really just wanted to like highlight how awkward of a seed this was for both of us. Because from what it sounds like Hugo got really close, and obviously given the fact that party house can go pretty quickly here, mostly just wanted to sit down and fully highlight how awkward that seed actually was. So Warp Take goes pretty well for me until I forget where the coffee is on this 5th level and how to trigger it. So I end up having to look it up in the resource dock and then get it. But thankfully that was actually the only time I needed to even reference the resource dock in this match, which felt pretty good because as someone who's written a lot for it, I'm not reliant on it, but I do end up using it more in matches than the average player would. But a lot of these goals that are on this card are ones that I felt pretty comfortable doing. So here I'm trying to beat 4 levels in 5 different games, and theoretically have my final game be Open Tomb Mortal. Mostly because I wanted to be able to actually use Mortal 1 for a levels goal, because you never get to see that. I miscounted in the middle of the game, but I forgot that I had already done that in Warp Tank, so is what it is, but definitely could have already marked the space off or whatever. But I did get to use Open Tomb Mortal to be able to clear the final boss of Mortal, have that count as a level, and then come back and have my 4 levels be marked off in the middle of World 3, and then also parlay that into just beating all of World 3 here. Meanwhile, Hugo is working on a gift rush here, and I guess given the amount of gifts I had now that I'm looking at it, I probably should have also been trying to gift rush, because that would have helped me out a bit, but instead I miscounted with games and decided to go for this Mortal goal, which I think is helping me a little bit more than it actually is, because I again already have the levels goal. Gets a little dicey towards the end of that, but we are able to grab that, and continuing my streak of menu games this run, I am pretty happy that I got to play some Rock On Island, because Rock On is one of my favorite games of the collection, and actually a game that I sat down and learned recently. To be perfectly honest, this is also some of the best like Rock On play that I've had in a minute, just in terms of like the amount of quick stuff that I was able to do at the end of each match. But more importantly, I guess, on Hugo's side, even though I am up 7-6, Hugo has a pretty big advantage at this point on gifts, and is starting to threaten the middle row bingo. And just being perfectly honest, I thought I had already blocked every bingo that was possible and that we were going to majority. and my eyes did not necessarily see this bingo threat forming as much as it actually was, until basically until the Barbuda thing was marked off. But as I mentioned earlier in this recap, it's a little harder to see bingos, period, but especially when the middle space of the bingo isn't marked yet. So even though this game of Rock On is going incredibly well for me, and Hugo and I basically finish up our goals at almost the exact same time here, spoilers, ended up needing a little bit of extra time in the party house seed. Also worth mentioning that Hugo lost their previous attempt of that party house seed on the final day, so they were definitely more aware of how awkward of a seed it was heading into that, and likely had a little bit of backup. But tied up 7-7. I'm able to finish Oasis pretty quick, grab that, and then I immediately pop into Party House because I now see how dangerous that actually is. At the exact same time that, once again, we have another head-to-head. I've lost track of how many head-to-heads we had in this match, but I want to say it was at least 5 and potentially 6. Which, honestly, given how close this game was, is pretty wild. Let me actually count this really quick, because it was Mooncat, Pin Golf, Grimstone, Golfaria, and Party House, right? Yeah. So, honestly, given how close of a game this was, I am absolutely stoked that I was able to play Hugo as close as I did and have 5 head-to-heads here. I am also happy that we ended up getting to play a direct head-to-head in the same party house seed as what ended up being, I guess, my final square of the season. But just having a direct head-to-head party house race at any point in the season has been pretty rare, to be honest. And having it on the exact same seed is even more rare, because I think the only time I've seen a head-to-head in Party House might have actually been another Hugo game that I was reviewing this season, now that I think about it. But should have, or when I reviewed that, it definitely was players who were doing 2 random scenarios. So, like, obviously the RNG of the scenarios also played in. So, honestly, it was really cool to be able to end this on head-to-head Party House VIPs only. Actually, rather serendipitously that I just noticed, my season started on a good foot, because my center square victory against a rank was the Trotters Bingo Sync seed, where you have to win in Trotters and win. And I guess my season ended on a center square of also using my Bingo Sync seed. And yeah, I want to say it was a game with Hugo. I couldn't remember who was playing, but it definitely was Union that I remember. And both of you were like super, super close on your party house seeds, and definitely came down to RNG. Yeah, and this is me in the middle of the game begging for a crumb of popularity to be able to actually win this in time. Because, like, I'm only a couple of days behind Hugo, but I also don't have a ton of, like, good popularity units. And I'm considering going for wrestlers and stuff. But I end up actually kind of pulling an audible that I've literally never done with any party house seed that I've ever had. And I'm like, you know what? If there's ever a scenario for werewolves to be good, it'll be here. So I start stocking up on werewolves, and then have to remind myself of how spying works with werewolves, which I have learned at some point, but was not knowledge I was expecting to have to bust out in the middle of the season. But for anyone who's wondering, if you have a werewolf and you use a spy, or a driver, I guess, and spy's in the specific scenario, use spy on the previous form of werewolves. So if a werewolf is like in werewolf form when you're spying on it, you actually want to invite it in then, because it's going to turn normal And if it's normal when you're looking at it, you have to be careful about if you invite it in because it'll turn into trouble. And yeah, I see that someone in chat was mentioning why I wanted to go for security over werewolves. But I'm gonna be honest, security is like a top tier unit to me, and wrestlers are kind of like whatever. Like wrestlers are fine, and in this scenario specifically, I think wrestlers were probably better. But in almost every other game, I prefer to just cycle out security if I don't need them, while also using them as either a deck filler or a way to get rid of a trouble where I don't have other trouble mitigation and stuff. So like for this specific seed that I have, I'm basically just able to insta security out any kind of issue here, and then scan with spy here. Yeah, so Hugo played a little more aggressively here heading into the final couple of days. I've more been commenting on my strategy for this, so I don't actually know how many star units he's at currently. But given that it is coming down to more or less the final day here, it's a pretty risky situation. And I think both Hugo and I are in a position where we can win. Yeah, so security is nice for how cheap it is, but I also kind of like that it's 0 popularity because you can then cycle itself out really easily, and it's a little harder to justify that with Wrestler because you can obviously still do that, but a lot of the times you kind of need the 2 popularity from Wrestler, and in most scenarios just getting 2 popularity is kind of whatever. In this specific scenario, I think getting 2 popularity actually ended up being pretty big here. But we do see the final day Dragon Rush as Hugo's basically in the situation where he needs to pull both of the dragons to be able to win. And then with me having 9 days left, yeah, I mean I guess so, but I mentioned it to our rank at some point when we were both watching Party House, and security specifically kind of reminds me a lot of Upstart Goblin from Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you're basically cycling a nothing card to be able to get like more consistency and stuff. And for the cost of 4 specifically, like you can kind of just have that in your deck and immediately not really worry about as much trouble, even if you don't have like standard trouble mitigation or whatever. And given the like 2.5 cost of that basically for Wrestler, it like doesn't really add that much more. But I will say in this specific scenario, I think Wrestler probably would have been better. Obviously you have to save up to get to the point of getting wrestlers and stuff more, but with how limited popularity generation was in this one, and also how restrictive the money was, because typically you have one or the other, right, in a Party House seed, where like either your popularity's not really doing great but you have like the best money generation in the world so it doesn't matter, or your money generation's not great but you have a bunch of like high pop units and can like move stuff around. And this is one of those seeds where like you didn't really have either of those, and there was nothing either of us could do about it, and we just had to sit down and figure it out. And I think that's a really cool way to have a playoff game end, because Party House otherwise is not really a game that we ever really see extended bingo play in. Like it's pretty much only if there's a specific Party House space on the board. And even then, I would say 90% of the Party House that we get to see in bingo is just people beating best wishes really quickly. So I'm honestly super stoked that my season was able to come down to a weird fucking Party House seed where Hugo still had to win on the final day, and I was in, I don't even want to say a better position, but like I was in a good enough position where I could have won that round if I had had like an extra couple minutes. And honestly, just a really cool game. I hadn't gotten a chance to actually watch that back and realize that we had 5 head-to-heads in that, but really, really back and forth game. We can imagine how if any of those head-to-heads have gone differently, this board would have looked like completely different. So getting a way where, yeah, GG Hugo. I did not realize we had 5 head-to-heads in that game. But very, very well played. That is a really, really cool highlight of the season, honestly, and I might even end up just highlighting this as a specific thing for my YouTube to be able to recap that game specifically, because both of us were neck and neck the entire time. And honestly, if I was able to get that party house seed in the end, this game absolutely was going to majority, which would have been hilarious, because I've only practiced that Vanger very hard once. So we could have gotten to see a little unscripted Vanger of me running around hoping I get to 25%. But like every other space on this board was still pretty fast, honestly, so yeah, very, very well played, honestly. The fact that we got to end it on a weird seed of party house race is pretty much all I could ask for. And you'll see both of us more in you would have had a big advantage if it went to majority. There was a lot of squares I was not comfortable with left. Yeah, so Metroidvania, I've practiced enough that I think I would have been fine with that, especially with the Vanger synergy. Bug Hunter I spent like 6 hours earlier in the season to do. Night Manor Diamond is pretty fast, but I would have probably needed to use the guide for that just to remind myself. I'm going to be honest, that Hyper Contender Hyper Difficulty Square is one that I've never actually practiced, but I've seen enough that I think I know how to do. But yeah, the Hyper Contender Square and the Waldorf's Journey Square are the ones that I would be most scared of not completing in this one. And then trying to figure out 4 gold discs, actually. Let me look through, because I saw the 4 gold discs square and kind of just like immediately threw it aside. But there's Mooncat, Magic Garden, Pin Golf. Oh, and Night Manor. Yeah, no, that would have been a perfectly fine board to go for gold discs on. I think, honestly, if I would have sat down, that might have been the next square I invested diamond. Or 2 chests, since we both had, or I had 1 game of 2 chests from Grimstone, and you had 2, so. But yeah. I was really excited because this was my first game against Hugo, and if this is any indication of any future games I have against Hugo, they're all going to be really fucking good. You never tried the RNG minute before? Alright, well, yeah, that's based, because I threw it to the wind